I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. I really appreciate it when you all give me case ideas, and this one came from you all. Michelle Troconis is on trial right now for conspiracy to commit murder when her ex, because I guess her and her boyfriend Fotis, who is married to Jennifer. So we're gonna go through everybody in just a moment. But the two individuals pictured here are Michelle and Fotis. So Fotis's wife, Jennifer, went missing back in May of 2019. And this was 2 years into a very contentious divorce. And there were major custody issues, and the prosecution is currently presenting their case against Michelle. And I love following lawyers because they will tell you that while you're listening to the prosecution, you're going to see, like, you're kind of going to be on their side, but then the defense is going to present their side. So you really can't make a decision until the end. And that's what jurors are supposed to do. And there have been two jurors so far that have been dismissed from this case. I think they were both alternates. We will go through that in a moment as well. But I want to talk about Michelle. I want to talk about Fotis. And then I also want to talk about a new law that was inspired by this case in the state of Connecticut, specifically related to individuals who are victims of verbal and psychological or financial harm, them being able to get restraining orders against their abusers. While that type of restraining order might not have made a huge difference in this particular case, they do hope that laws like Jennifer's Law will help save others in the future. So let's dive right in. I shared a link to this documentary, and if you're following the trial, so people that are really law nerds, people that are into following the trial, they often don't look at the outside sources and the outside information. They want to see everything presented in court. Just to prepare for this video, I did watch this documentary that was made by LMN, and I have a link to that down in the description if you want to dive deeper into this case. I also want to give a special shout out to Harvard lawyer Lee. I did take a look at some of their analysis, and it just helped me understand some of the legal things that came up with the jurors. I try to cite my sources, y'all. I'm not Becky Hill. Can I say that? I think I can say that. She admitted it. So let me start with my disclaimer. I am a psychologist. I am not involved in this case in any way, and I'm just sharing my thoughts and opinions based on publicly available information. Everyone involved is innocent until proven guilty, and there are some trigger warnings for this discussion because issues around emotional and verbal harm. And then there's also a trigger warning for unaliving oneself because that's what Fotis Dulos, he ended up with all the custody things, being charged with his wife's murder. He did write a note, and I think he blamed everyone. He talked about his innocence. The evidence doesn't look good for him, in my opinion. The evidence that's come forward, the things I've seen, it does seem that, like, he was clearly involved and he did a lot of things to try to cover his tracks along the way, but the investigators in this case, they were able to get video footage of some of his movements after the fact, and Michelle Troconis was with him, and so that's why she's been charged with conspiracy to commit capital M, because she's right with him, her boyfriend, while he's disposing of evidence, according to the police. The authorities believe that the actions that Fotis Dulos took after the fact, and like I said, Michelle was right there with him, that it was to try to cover up an attack that happened on May 24th, 2019. And this was after Jennifer had dropped off their 5 children at school. Her body has never been recovered. And just for the family, I do hope that they, because it's hard to get closure. I did another video on traumatic grief and traumatic losses, and it can be harder to get closure when, number one, your loved one dies in this manner, and then on top of that, it was by their spouse, and then on top of that, like, the father of, like, your nieces or nephews or grandchildren, and on top of that, that he ended up taking his own life and there was never justice and you can't find her body. Like all of those things can really pile up and make it difficult for a family to grieve. Fotis Dulos's family, they continue to adamantly support his innocence and they don't believe that he was involved. So, Michelle Troconis's trial is currently happening, and her charges include conspiracy to commit murder, evidence tampering, and hindering prosecution. She has pled not guilty to all these things, and she says she has no idea what happened to Jennifer or where her body might be. All right. So now there was some really good news coverage where Fotis actually did an interview while awaiting trial, and I definitely want to take a look at that. I'll start off by saying he comes off incredibly charming, and I'm also going to play some of the nanny's testimony because I do think some of the strongest testimony has come from the nanny who still is with the kids to this day. So the nanny that has been with the family, I think since the kids were born or like that's been with this family, she continues to be a support to these kids to this day. And in her testimony, she will talk about how she saw Fotis change when others were watching. So if he didn't think anyone else was watching, that he could come off pretty aggressive with Jennifer. But if somebody else was there, then he would. She didn't say flip a switch, but that's almost what she was describing. He would flip a switch and become more calm and peaceful. And it wasn't this aggressive verbal assault that was happening before he knew somebody else was there.
I seriously pinched myself a couple of times and I said, this cannot be true.
And for those who think he had something to do with it,
They draw their own conclusions. So I've already been convicted in their mind.
Good evening. I'm Natalie Pascarella.
And I'm David Ushery in for Stephen Holt tonight. It's a story that has captured national attention. A Connecticut mother of 5 missing since the end of May.
And today, the estranged husband of Jennifer Dulos spoke exclusively with our Sarah Wallace. Here's what he has to say about Jennifer, his children, and the people who think he's guilty.
People say the spouse did it.
Mm-hmm. I know, but I know what I've done and I know what I haven't done. So I have to stand and fight and hope that the truth is going to come out.
51-year-old Fotis Dulos knows that in the court of public opinion, he's guilty of murdering his estranged wife, Jennifer, even though her body has never been found. In an exclusive interview at his Connecticut home, he asked that people not jump to conclusions. The two were involved in a contentious divorce.
A lot of people have assumed that you're guilty. What do you say to those people?
I think they should wait. So statistically, when something like this happens, 90 or 95%, it's the spouse. So I can understand why people feel like this.
And your answer to that is?
Well, I'm in the 5 or 10% category.
Jennifer, who had moved to New Canaan with the couple's 5 children, was last seen dropping off the kids at their school on May 24th. Her car later found at a nearby park.
All right, so let's dive right into some of the nanny's testimony before I give some of my thoughts and observations about Fotis. I want us to hear from the nanny.
And you'd mentioned that Mr. Dulos was a role model to you during this time.
Mhm.
Why did you consider him to be a role model?
When I first started working, he was just incredibly nice. He made me feel comfortable. He was funny. He, I was fresh out of college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it sounded like I was getting this really great opportunity, even though it had nothing to do with any of the work I've ever done. And it seemed like he just wanted to push me and, make me better.
And did there come a point in time when the dynamic between Jennifer and Mr. Dulos began to change from when you first met them?
Yeah.
Could you describe how the dynamic changed for the jury?
The big dynamic change was in March of 2017, which is when Jennifer found out about his affair. And a few months after that, it would totally changed.
So she's going to go in to describe how Jennifer came to be suspicious of his relationship with Michelle. And it sounds like Fotis and Michelle, they like the same activities and people have mentioned in the comments, and I'll just mention it now. So Jennifer and Fotis, I think they started dating possibly because they got legally married 6 weeks after his divorce was final, which means that their relationship likely started while he was still actively married. And I don't disparage Jennifer in any way for that. I don't know if we're fully aware because when he started his relationship with Michelle, they clearly were not separated. They ended up separating after that, and Jennifer had to carefully leave and make a plan because she was concerned that things could escalate with him, which they did. So I believe the nanny testified over 2 days. This is the second day of her testimony.
What did she say to you?
She told me he is having an affair and I have proof.
What was her proof?
I think through email and receipts, she found out that he went on a trip to Utah with Michelle and a friend of his and his girlfriend.
What was her demeanor like as she said this?
She was, I think she just was just like, I knew it. She's again, very soft-spoken. So she seemed sad, but also just kind of like she was trying to figure out what to do.
Did she indicate to you whether or not she was going to be confronting Mr. Doulos about the affair?
She told me that she was going to talk to him about it, and she asked if I not mention anything.
Well,
Gonna fast forward.
not she planned to confront Mr. Doulos about the affair?
Oh yeah, she asked me, well, she told me that she was going to, and she asked me not to mention anything to him or to anyone.
And did you eventually speak with Jennifer about her intentions regarding the future of their marriage?
Not that night, no.
When did you?
It kind of changed throughout time, what her intentions were.
Okay, can you describe to the jury what you mean by that?
So I was in the house the next day, and when Fotis arrived too. And so when I got to the house, she pulled me aside and told me that she spoke to Fotis, and he admitted to the affair, and that she was going to try and have this be as civil as possible. Because she opened up more, saying that she was no longer in love with Fotis, but she had 5 kids. So they were going to try and work out what they could.
And directing your attention now to April 2017, did Jennifer make any requests of you as to whether or not you would stay on as the nanny?
Yeah, over the next few weeks, things were changing, and so her plan changed. And she asked me to go with her when she was planning to move, and I agreed.
Where did this conversation take place?
At a coffee shop in Avon, which is the town right next to Farmington.
Were you still employed by 4 Group at this time?
Yes.
Why did you decide to go with her?
Because she was my friend and I trusted her. And I wanted to help her.
Did you ever talk to Mr. Doulos about your future with 4 Group?
Yeah, at that time, I've been working for 4 Group for a few years, and I just had no interest in it at all. And so I didn't see a future with 4 Group anymore.
Did you give your notice?
I did. It was going to be for the end of May.
I want to direct your attention now to April and May of 2017. Was Jennifer still living at 4 Jefferson Crossing?
Yes.
Was Mr. Doulos still living at 4 Jefferson Crossing?
Yes.
Were they still sleeping in the same bedroom?
No.
Where were they sleeping?
Jennifer was in their master bedroom, and they had a 3rd floor office, but also bedroom. And so Fotis was up there.
Can you describe the dynamic between Mr. Doulos and Jennifer in April of 2017?
It started to become very tense and uncomfortable being in the presence of both of them. They were arguing a lot. It was, again, just very uncomfortable.
Were you still working for a group at this time?
I was.
You had mentioned that you witnessed arguments between Mr. Dulos and Jennifer.
Yes.
I want to direct your attention now to an argument that involved a piece of paper.
Mhm.
Can you describe for the jury what you saw between Jennifer and Mr. Dulos and their interactions?
Objection, Your Honor. Prior bad acts, relevance as to Michelle Troconis.
Well, can you describe what you saw?
Gonna fast forward.
So one day I drove their family car often. It was a Suburban, and I was driving through their garage. There's kind of this like little, I don't know, I guess like a bridge. There's a garage and a garage, and then you drive through. So I was driving through and pulling into the garage. And as I was doing that in their backyard patio, I saw Fotis kind of chasing Jennifer with this piece of paper.
Objection, Your Honor.
Ground.
Same grounds, Your Honor. Prior bad acts related to Fotis Dulos, relevance as to Michelle Troconis.
Well, the grounds has to be,
Gonna fast forward.
So after I pulled into the garage, they saw me pull in and they both went inside. And so I had some of the kids in the car. I don't remember where we were coming back from, but we walked in through the garage to the mudroom, to the kitchen. And I just kind of like focused on the kids, getting them to where they needed to be. And it was later on that Jennifer told me what Fotis was saying.
well, it was later on that Jennifer, and then the court did not hear the balance of the
Told me, Your Honor.
testimony. So,
Gonna fast forward.
well,
They object.
Scene, we can
sense that.
her demeanor as you saw her being chased with a piece of paper.
She looked scared and worried.
And can you describe Mr. Dulos's demeanor for the jury during that same interaction?
He looked angry.
Did you ever witness Mr. Dulos make any threats about the children?
Yeah.
And did he make these threats in Jennifer's presence?
Yes.
What type of threat did he make to Jennifer?
That he would take the kids to Greece and not come back.
And that's where he was from. He was originally from Greece.
And did Jennifer ever express her fear to you that that would happen?
Yeah, a lot.
That's why in the United States, in order to get your child a passport, both parents have to be there for that. And if like one parent is flying internationally with a child by themselves, sometimes it can like flag. Like sometimes they really want to make sure that people aren't like fleeing the country with children.
When was this threat made?
Through those couple months, so April, May 2017.
Did there come a time when Jennifer made a decision to leave for Jefferson Crossing?
Yes.
Okay. And then the nanny's going to go into just the deliberate steps that Jennifer took for her safety when looking at leaving. And I do want to switch to talk about Jennifer's law because Jennifer attempted to get a restraining order. And what she was able to do was have visits be supervised. And it wasn't within it was at her house in the backyard, but it wasn't inside the home. And so that's where there is some DNA evidence of like Fotis like on the inside doorknob of I think the garage door or something. Like there are a few places where they found his DNA. And Michelle's lawyer tried to talk about, well, that could be transfer DNA from the kids, or like there's a lot of different reasons why that could be that way. But there's other evidence of paper towels being missing and just all of these other things that just aren't adding up. And not just like one roll of paper towels, we're talking 10 rolls of paper towels. So the night before, the nanny remembers restocking 12 rolls of paper towels in the pantry. And then the next day, for some reason, there was only two left. That 10 rolls were missing. And I think they might have found some paper towels in some of the garbage bags that Fotis disposed of. So during this process, when they decided to charge Fotis, I believe they charged him with murder. And then that's when I think the juvenile court or somehow a judge restricted his ability to see his kids, that he wouldn't be able to see them until this matter was resolved. And then that's when he ended up unaliving himself. And still, like, wrote a letter blaming everyone else. There seems to be some signs of possible covert narcissism. So let's talk about Jennifer's Law and then we'll talk about covert narcissist. And then we'll dig in a little bit deeper into Michelle. So this site just breaks down Jennifer's Law and how it affects Connecticut family law. So domestic violence is not only physical. So when Jennifer filed the restraining order, there had to be evidence of threatened physical harm. That was the only way that she could get a restraining order, is if there was threatened physical harm. So this talks about the fact that domestic harm is not only physical. If the victim is subject to behavior that severely restricts their personal liberty, their ability to make decisions based on their free will, they are subject to a form of abuse that remained outside of the scope of Connecticut law for far too long. So before 2021, victims were required to demonstrate that they were subject to continuous threats of physical injury or stalking. That changed with the enactment of Jennifer's Law, which allows victims to file for restraining orders on the basis of non physical coercive control. And it specifically says a pattern of behavior toward a person who is or has been an intimate partner, family, or household member, which causes fear or harm to such person or restricts such person's freedom of action. All right. So, anytime we talk about narcissism, I always talk about the fact that narcissism is a spectrum. And with the word or term covert narcissist, let's just talk about this a little bit more. The covert narcissism is not a DSM 5 diagnosis. This is just language that we use as a public. Often mental health professionals might use these terms, but there is no like DSM diagnosis of covert narcissism. The only thing that's in the DSM is narcissistic personality disorder. And let's find that acronym for the traits of narcissism. I really like this acronym, Special Me. It's sense of self importance, preoccupation with power, beauty, or success, entitlement, can only be around people who are important or special, interpersonally exploitive for their own gain, arrogant, lack of empathy, must be admired, envious of others, or believe others are envious of them. And so here are those traits of that that far end of that spectrum of narcissistic personality disorder. So this article talks about the fact that when we hear someone is a narcissist, we often imagine them being overly assertive or outwardly aggressive in an effort to proclaim they are in fact the most important person in the room. And to me, I think according to just what people have described and talked about with Fotis, it seems like with other people, he might have hidden some of his toxic traits, but people that knew him well, there was probably this like switch that could happen. It reminds me in the Timothy Ferreter case when I believe it was his oldest daughter was describing how the way he was at home and the way he was in public was very different. There are two different types of narcissism. Overt narcissism is the one that we typically think of, the textbook definition, the one who comes off as self absorbed, vain, outwardly expressive about their self importance, but tends to be insecure. Covert narcissism, also known as vulnerable narcissism, is the more introverted side of NPD. A covert narcissist experiences the same insecurities as an overt narcissist, but internalizes their self importance, often while hyper focusing on their need for attention. Some of the traits of covert narcissism, overly inflated sense of self importance, lack of empathy, need for excessive admiration, sense of entitlement, surrounding yourself with superficial relationships, taking advantage of others for personal gain, resistance to change, hyper focusing on fantasies of grandeur. Because with Fotis's business, there were even some allegations that he might not have been as successful as he really was. And there is this sensitivity to criticism, difficulty fitting in, and so I will put a link to this down below. I'm not saying that Fotis was or wasn't. I'm just saying based on some of the things I've heard, some of these traits just made based on some of the things I heard, it just made me think if there might have been some of this going on, especially people talked about how handsome he was. And I think even in that news article I played before, at the very beginning, I didn't play the full thing. At the very beginning, they talk about the handsome Greek husband. Like that's just how he's described, even in the news. Now back to Michelle Troconis. So she was the girlfriend at the time. She has a 10-year-old daughter. Fotis was mad. So in that documentary I watched, it looks like a part of his custody agreement was that the kids weren't supposed to be around Michelle. That was something that was really important to Jennifer. He thought Michelle was a good person, so he should be able to do whatever he wanted. And he defied that court order, which was then what made him have to have the supervised visits because the judge couldn't trust that he would stay within the bounds that the judge had set. That defiance of the rules and stepping outside of those bounds can also bring up some of those antisocial type traits. Remember, antisocial doesn't mean not social, it's that against social norms. Like the rules don't apply to me, I do what I want because there are allegations that he might have like dumped trash for his construction sites at different places or possibly been investigated for that in the past because we're going to watch some video from the trial and the news is going to cover it. I'll put a link to the full news clip down in the description. There is video of him going around with Michelle in the car dumping out these trash bags. And they were able to collect some of those trash bags. And I believe today, Tuesday the 23rd, they were showing some of the contents of those trash bags that really point to something really tragic happening to Jennifer. So let's take a look at this.
It's day 7 of the Michelle Troconis trial in Stanford, focused on video from along Albany Avenue in Hartford. See that pickup truck there? That's part of it. That's when Fotis Dulos was caught on camera dumping trash bags in a bunch of different bins along that road.
Today, experts and investigators took the stand to break down this video for the jury. NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geis is covering this trial for us. He joins us live from Stanford with more of what happened in the court.
And it's my understanding that there were multiple stops that were made, and they believe the thing that he's carrying right now is the floor mat from her car. And I don't believe they were able to recover that.
Courtroom, Kevin.
Yeah, Mike Keisha, we got some new angles and some new video that we have not seen before, as well as evidence that was collected along Albany Avenue in Hartford, all pointing to Michelle Troconis' first true appearance in this trial.
It was like a clink. It was like a clink noise.
Connecticut State Police Sergeant Michael Butin describing state troopers' recovery of 2 license plates from a storm drain along Albany Avenue in Hartford, in a location Fotis Dulos was seen on surveillance video discarding something into a storm drain.
There was some effort made to alter their appearance. The top portion actually wasn't the plate itself. It was some type of blue tape with like a clear adhesive.
After troopers were able to uncover that the plates were altered, they ran the registration.
They came back canceled on a 2007 Chevy Suburban that was registered to Mr. Dulos.
Through witnesses, prosecutors are taking the jury through video along Albany Avenue in Hartford, which appears to show Fotis Dulos discarding trash at various points.
Specifically, the trash getting dropped off in multiple City of Hartford garbage cans. In order to get an evidence collection team.
Also seen in the video at the time of the discarded plates, a female figure investigators believe to be Michelle Troconis, leaning out of the Ford Raptor.
It appears to be a white female. Looks like wearing a short sleeve shirt, and it's kind of hard to tell, but maybe her hair is in a ponytail. And I could see at least one of her feet on the sidewalk, and her right hand appears to be reaching down toward the brick or pavement.
Defense attorney John Schoenhorn concerned about some of the testimony continuing to come in, arguing the prosecution is putting him in a position where he has to defend Fotis Dulos and not his client.
There's already a guilt by association problem that's arising.
So remember, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a psychologist. We are here to talk about the psychological side and the psychological aspect. In my personal opinion, the chances that Michelle had no idea what was going on, it's possible. And I think that's what the defense is going to hope. At least one person on the jury is thinking maybe she didn't know. And because they can't prosecute or get justice through FOTUS, I could see the defense kind of being like, well, now they're trying to come on my client. But they were, from the very beginning, FOTUS and Michelle were charged at the same time throughout this entire process. I do think she's going to continue to deny knowing anything or having any part of any of this. And I wish there were some, just for justice for Jennifer, like if Michelle truly was involved, that there was some phone data or like there was something, some cryptic messages between the two of them or something like that. And I think at some point, because Fotis broke up with Michelle, I think he was dating someone else at the time of his death. And she still has not like said like he told me where she is. Like she hasn't said anything negative about him throughout this entire process. And I think the defense would say because she doesn't know anything and she's innocent. I don't know. It's my understanding that Jennifer came from money and that her family was very wealthy and that him leaving Jennifer was going to affect that it had the potential to affect him financially, especially if his business wasn't doing as well as, he was claiming or putting off like it was. Her father, I believe, Jennifer's father, self-made man, like, worked his way up. I believe they're from Venezuela, and, like, I think the father would loan him money. Like, this is all based on the documentary, so this isn't based on facts that have come up in court. All of that just makes me wonder if he didn't think that he was going to see his kids, like, did he get desperate and wanting his kids and wanting this different life, and did something really horrific happen in Jennifer's garage? Because that's what the evidence seems to point to. In the documentary, they have this whole theory of how Fotis got to the house and like everything that happened. Please check out that documentary if you want to see all of that. I don't know if that information will come into Michelle's trial because Michelle was like, they're not saying that Michelle was there when something happened to Jennifer. They're not even saying that. But they're saying that after the fact that she was there with him as he's discarding evidence. And so now for the whole juror issue. What the what? So day 4 of the trial, and I think they're projecting this might be like a 6-week. Did they say like 6 weeks? Like this might be somewhere around like a 6-week trial. Day 4, the judge comes on to address a juror issue. So I'm gonna find that location and we are gonna take a look at that. Okay, so let me just set the scene. This is day 4 of this trial, and the judge gets a note that says that a marshal that was with a juror shouted something to the effect of like, "I love you," or "I love what you're doing," or something like that to the one of the prosecuting attorneys, and it was right in front of 2 alternate jurors. That could possibly send the wrong message to a juror. So you wouldn't do that. The marshal wouldn't make a statement like that at all, especially not in front of a juror. And so the marshal came forward and he was like, "It wasn't me that said it. It was actually one of the jurors that leaned out and said, 'I love you,' to." What? What? And that's one of the like, what? And so let's take a look at that.
remark was that, according to what was reported to this court, we love you. But the attribution to the marshal was an incorrect attribution. The court has now learned that it was not the marshal who said, we love you to Attorney Moran, but it was one of the jurors. That is cause for the court to have to bring in that juror to determine whether those remarks were made. And if those remarks were made, then that juror may have to be dismissed.
All right. So I'm going to fast forward because the marshal actually had to come forward and go on the record to testify about this. So let's watch that part.
You may be seated. Marshal Alvarado, the court will just draw your attention to the time before we took our lunch and recess, and you were in the presence of at least two jurors after the court had recessed. Can you tell?
Because the reason why they had to clarify this is because the head of the marshals went to this guy and probably like gave him an earful, like, I can't believe you did this. And he's like, it wasn't me, it was the juror. And so they had to go back to the judge and all of this had to happen.
The court, what happened and what you heard.
I was on the elevator coming back from lunch with the two jurors, and it made a stop on the second floor. Attorneys Moran and Manning tried to get on the elevator. They turned back around, and in the midst of that, I said, thanks, Liz, and the juror ultimately kind of stuck his head out and said, we love you. The door closed, and then we went on our way.
So, all right. So the juror is also a male. And so I think because what the attorneys did is they saw the elevator door open, jurors are on there. And so they're like, oh no, it's like, we're going to wait for the next one because that could, the prosecuting attorneys being on the same elevator with the jurors. It's my understanding, especially watching Harvard lawyer Lee, I want to say, watching and all the other lawyers that I watch as well, you don't want to make a lot of eye contact with the jury, like outside of the courtroom. Like you just don't want, because this could be your grounds for a mistrial if the defense is like, wait a minute, there's bias, and that's not going to happen in this case. No worries, we'll keep going.
Now, was that juror's comment directed towards Attorney Moran?
I believe so, yes.
And
All right, so now I'm going to fast forward because then the judge does have to meet with that juror, and the judge is going to give an update of what happened after that.
what was believed to be a marshal that was heard by some jurors who were sitting on the case. It was later discovered that it was not the marshal that made those comments. It was one of the jurors who made the comment. Now, the comment was directed towards, as the court understands it, at least one person, Attorney Elizabeth Moran, who is one of the assistant state's attorneys who was assisting the state in the presentation of exhibits. The comment made by one of the elevator banks in the presence of another juror and one of the marshals, or the marshal that was involved, was that we love you, directed at least to Attorney Moran. Upon learning that the comment was made and that it was made by one of the jurors. The court conducted an inquiry calling that juror to the courtroom and having that juror sit in the jury box. And the court asked the juror if he made such comments, and the tenor of the response was yes. The comment was directed at both Attorney Moran and Attorney Manning. The court indicated to the juror that it can easily be perceived that the comment made to at least Attorney Moran can be an endorsement, an opinion about the strength of the state's case, and that he at this time was favoring the state's case. The court explained to the juror that the appearance that there was a favorable opinion of the state's case indicates to this court at this time that it would be difficult to proceed with him seated as a juror.
So basically, that juror is going to be dismissed because he outwardly showed kind of like favoritism, or that he was agreeing or that he was siding with the state's case, which jurors can't do. Jurors, I believe, like part of their oath, or like what jurors are supposed to do, is they have to stay neutral throughout the entire until they get to that deliberation room. That's when they're able to say, this is what I think, this is the evidence I think is strong. This is like, until they're in that deliberating room, they are not able to comment. They're not able to form like that strong of an opinion. And the juror learned, like, because some people, I guess, they might not know that, but ooh, I'm guessing they were probably told that, but we all learned today. Aw. And then there was a second juror issue. So let's take a look at that. I think that was at the beginning of this day. And I put full links to everything I'm showing down below.
There has been no election of a foreperson. So this note that the court received is not dated. It is not signed. It was handed to the court by the marshal moments ago. It reads, one of the jurors discussed something about the case, and it was all over social media. Said it was like Gone Girl. A brief mention.
So we're going to talk about Gone Girl. If you haven't seen it, I'll give a trigger warning before just talking about that.
Several other jurors said, don't discuss this. You can have this marked as a court exhibit. Now, the court did not read the name of the juror, which is on that note.
So the judge is going to have to talk with the juror. I'm going to fast forward to the outcome of that conversation. So Gone Girl. So I'm going to keep my hands up. We'll do. And that's what Harvard lawyer Lee, I think they held up like a red thing or something. So while I'm talking about what this reference means, I'll keep my hands up. And then once I put my hands down, you'll know that I'm not talking about it anymore. So Gone Girl. Gone Girl is a movie where a woman fakes their disappearance, and they're pretty much like they're still alive. And so the juror making that reference is kind of alleging that Jennifer is still, which is so hurtful to the family, like the poor family. And so that is not at all believed to be the case. She wouldn't have abandoned her kids. Like it's just it's not the case. But the juror making that statement is incredibly prejudicial to the you can't make that type of statement. You can't put it on social media. You can't do those things. I'm gonna fast forward ahead to after the judge has met with the juror and I think also the person that wrote the note.
Whether one or more jurors needed to be excused. The court thereafter closed the courtroom. However, there is a transcript generated of the proceeding that was conducted during the closed courtroom. That transcript with the names of the jurors redacted should be available because the court is ordering that transcript to be expedited, hopefully by Monday morning, again with the jurors' names.
So those sounds, that's not me. So like whatever sounds, it's on the video. I'm sorry.
Redacted. The court questioned the juror who authored the note, and that juror verified the information in the note. The court then questioned the juror who was identified as the juror who made the comments. That juror indicated that the comments were made. The court indicated to that juror, juror number 186, that the reference made to Gone Girl and the fact that the case has received extensive social media attention may have influenced other jurors to possibly not afford the state or the defense, one or the other, a fair trial, an impartial trial. The court also indicated to that juror that the reference to Gone Girl, if any other juror was familiar with the film, may have influenced that juror to start to hear the evidence in terms of their familiarity with the film.
Yeah.
The court then dismissed juror number 186 and thereafter proceeded to question each juror individually, specifically whether each one of those jurors had heard the comments. Some did, some did not. Whether if they had heard the comments, they were able to still afford the state and the defense a fair and impartial trial. Without exception, every juror indicated that they would be able to afford the state and the defense a fair and impartial trial. Every juror indicated that they would not draw conclusions about the state's case or the defense's case prior to both the state and the defense resting and they are charged to begin to deliberate. Those jurors also indicated they will still maintain their ability to avoid media coverage and social media coverage about the case. Again.
Wow. So a juror made an inappropriate comment because even if the person wasn't believing what the prosecution was putting forward so far, they just can't come to a closed-minded conclusion. They're supposed to keep an open mind. They're supposed to hear both sides. And then once they deliberate, that's when they have those conversations. They're definitely not supposed to go on social media and put their thoughts on the case there, especially as a seated juror, or even an alternate. You're not supposed to do those things. I love talking about these things and covering this because in the Murdaugh trial, there are some allegations of misconduct by Becky Hill, misconduct. Like there's so many allegations. And if somebody did overhear Becky Hill say something, really this would have been what they should like, it would have been to write a note to the judge in order for the judge to then address it. Because Becky Hill was in a position of power, that might have been why nobody came forward. So talking about something another juror said, talking about something versus somebody that is like that runs the court. Like not the judge, but like that scheduling and somebody that does that part. They might have seen her as an authority if she did do something that was out of the norm. I will definitely be following the Murdaugh case if Murdaugh gets a retrial, but uh, back to the case at hand. That's why I record these so I can edit out some of my squirrel moments. That one's probably going to stay in. If I was on the jury, I don't know. So the prosecution, they're starting to get to their evidence. Did she know? Did she not know? Michelle, that is. If there was something that was more blatant, like like her Googling, how to get rid of, I don't know, like there was something that was more concrete because the state has to be able to prove it. Like that's how our legal system works. Like everyone's entitled to a defense. I know people end up not liking defense attorneys. Like, they have to defend their client as best they can with what they have, and this defense has tried to get the judge to rule that some things aren't admissible before the testimony starts so that the defense attorney isn't having to interrupt and do their argument in front of the jury as much, but the judge is like, "Hey, like, I have to hear it. Like, I can't throw out this entire set of testimony before I hear exactly where it's going." And so that's been happening. Definitely going to keep an eye on this case as it goes. I will likely cover the verdict. If there's a case that you would like for me to cover, please let me know. Be sure to check out my other social media at Dr. Patrice Berry across platforms, and I will see you Saturday at 2 p.m. live Eastern Standard Time. Have a good one. Bye.